Well, hello. Thank you so much for joining me for this month's Guru Code podcast. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you every month. And it's great to try and find themes that I think actually might resonate with you and help you just have a bit of a think around things and find a new way of thinking about stuff. And this month, I think probably because of where we are in the year, I thought we might talk about change fatigue. And whether or not that would resonate with you. The term change fatigue, have you given it much thought? It's more likely to be a feeling that you have than a thought that you've had. Anyone who has known me over the years will know that I love change. I love a clean sheet of paper, a new diary, a good mind mapping session, a brainstorming session, although I don't think that's very PC anymore. But anything that challenges the status quo and allows us to do tweaks and refresh things and try something out is absolutely right up my alley. But after the last 24 months, who could blame you or me if we answered yes to feeling like actually change fatigue has hit us? Is it though because of the speed of change, or change has even been happening, or perhaps have you considered that it might be the lack of choice and the lack of control over the changes that have become the tiresome part of this? Change fatigue is a resistance or a passive resignation to uncertainty. The term is most often used when we're talking about employees or organisational change, or, we've all studied change management in one form or another. But what about us? Us as business owners? Is it a new phenomenon to use the term for us as business leaders and owners? Have we been forgotten? You see, who looks out for us when consistent change is being demanded? After all, we are usually the ones leading and deciding, big one, deciding on the changes. And so we are fully prepared to wrap up and look after the distress and the fallout from those around us. So New Year is literally days away. And I know there'll still be some clever clogs, I nearly swore, didn't I? clever clogs, waiting to say, oh, what changes are you going to make? Who would blame any of us if we just wanted to scream at them, go, are you kidding me? So how do you feel about change? There are certain words that can trigger a response in us unwittingly, aka unconsciously, subconsciously. And in my experience, change is one of those words that often creates the most enormous number of emotional opinions, objections, narrative between colleagues, staff, and in our own relationships. After all, the idea, the concept, the first inkling that change is coming will only be on your page until you start to share it. It doesn't matter if the change is being driven by the political, economical, social, or environmental climate. The perception of choice is always going to be the keen player in every discussion. Now, an article I found online by the HRdirector.com, I don't know these people at all, but I did think it was important to bring up because it reported the findings of a poll from October this year. And it showed that people were, instances of anxiety has been dropping. It's been dropping, but superseded by low mood, with the cause identified as having a lack of control. We've talked about locus of control in other podcasts, so I won't talk about it on here. But it's important, isn't it, to think of the anxiety, which you think would be still rife, actually has dropped and now has gone to this sort of that passive low mood stage where we just say, I quit, I give up, whatever. We're all humans, so what affects an employee is certainly going to affect us. And the last 2 years have absolutely found us exposed and in that constant state of flux and uncertainty, not to mention the limited choices in direction. So it's important for, in my view, and I hope in yours, that we approach New Year, the end of the financial year, with a real reflective approach where we look at our resilience, our preparedness for the future. We want to be as strong as we are in the best place that we can be. So am I going to talk to you about goal setting? Oh, no. Are we interested in New Year's resolutions? That would be a firm nope again. Instead, I want to talk to you about thinking about the new year ahead using more than just our logical mind, rather than just doing the normal that we always do. Let's just take it one step deeper. As we all know, if we accept that one of the causes, or a major cause of change fatigue, is that lack of perceived choice, then lack of choice only comes really when we have one plan, one goal, or one way of getting to our goals that have only been looked at from our logical mind. It's a bit like having a one-sided conversation rather than 3D or any depth to it. So for me, there's another reason for that fatigue in my book, and it's a lack of desire. It's a lack of passion, a lack of purpose to the required change. If in your heart of hearts, the change does not resonate with you, that you cannot see a reason for it or a purpose for it, you're going to be reluctant at best, or resistant at worst, but even worse than that. And I think this has happened to a lot of people. It's like, no, I'm quit. I'm not doing it at all. And rather than doing something, making the change, they just turn their backs on it. And I think that has happened. So we all need a purpose to do something. That's the wonderful thing about human beings. We can bring that emotion into it. We need that purpose in order to really own something. Now, this quote, I think, really says what I'm trying to pass over to you. You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect looking backwards. So you have to trust the dots will somehow connect in the future. That's Steve Jobs. And if he doesn't know about business, I don't know anyone who doesn't know about it. I don't know anyone better to really quote when it comes to business on things like this. And it is that sort of thing about that clarity over certainty, isn't it? I think it epitomizes it. And the clarity comes when you own your own vision. In your heart of hearts, you own your own vision. It is so real that it is almost tangible. We've said it before, haven't we? Everything has always been created twice, once in your mind first, and that's where we want to go. That's how we know that our dots will line up in the future. If you think about when we were allowed to travel, and maybe you paid for a holiday in 18 months' time, not once did it enter your mind when you put your deposit down or you paid for that holiday that you wouldn't be going. That's what we want for our businesses. That's how definite we want to be. We want to back ourselves from tomorrow, from the next day, to get to our vision at the end of the year or whenever it is. Growth will not happen without change, and success will never be achieved unless we actually have it and encourage it as changes, as an intrinsic part of our business makeup, if you like. It makes total sense, doesn't it, when you actually pinpoint it down like this and you actually clarify. And for the majority of us, we know, we logically accept change has to happen. But unconsciously, it's a different story, and that's the bit we want to get to, that subconscious level. So goal setting in business is often a paper exercise. That's how we've been taught. That's how a lot of the books and the manuals teach us to do it. You have to put it down on paper. And that's good. But either it's produced in a really long format that's like very, very wordy, or in a flow chart if you're lucky, because I do love a flow chart. But in a pictorial form. But actually, if you then talk about those plans, it's very rare that you really get excited about it. It's very rare that you actually can write your passion the way you can describe it if you've got it in your mind's eye. So, however, from it's about that. I suppose when I was if I take you back to when I was in the hospital and the NHS, and we had constant change, as you might imagine. And every now and again, they'd just throw something at you and say, we want this included. And I once said to them, it's like sewing on a spare arm. If it doesn't have blood flow, if it doesn't have oxygen to it, it won't stick. It won't last. It will die off. And that's what I'm trying to say to you about the way we're going to do this differently in 2022. We want it to have a purpose. We want it to have a heartbeat of its own. And I really do think we can do this differently. We do it by turning our goals of 2022 into that emotional connection. We turn it into an intention. Not because it lets us off the hook, because it doesn't. We still have to hold ourselves to account to it, and it will still have KPIs that still need to be measured. But because it will create a powerful desire that inspires us to keep going. Your goal is going to be developed in the first instance by your logical mind. That's how it all happens. That's where we create things. Same as it always has. But then we're going to take that goal and ask yourself, is this what I really want? Is this something that somebody else expects me to do? Is this the next logical step? Or actually, do I want to go in a different direction now? And that's where I want to take us. If your goal makes you excited, if you can feel a physical reaction when you visualize your outcome, if you can get excited about it, and you get your almost like butterflies in your tummy, that's when you've really connected to success. And to get your success anchored in place, for a deeper clarity, I want you to work it through these 4 questions to build that absolute rock solid picture of your goal, so you'll always recognize it as you approach it. And if you choose to do this exercise properly, that's exactly what this will give you. So just take a breath for a minute. Stop what you're doing. If you're doing something, you're just washing up whilst you're listening to this, or whatever it is you're doing, just stop and pause for a minute. Get an idea in your mind what you really want, what you really, really fancy for this next year ahead of us. And let's just put it through this tester. These are 4 ecology questions. So it's taking you, so you're looking at the much bigger picture, how it's going to actually have that life in the future. Take your vision and ask yourself, what will happen when I have this? What will happen when I have this? Then ask yourself, what will not happen when I have this? Third question, what will happen if I do not have it? And lastly, what will not happen if I do not have it? There's slight nuances in those questions. Repeat them. Go back over it. Take all of your plans, all of your thoughts, all of your visions through those and start building on them. And when you can see this picture in your mind, you have confirmed an emotional connection with it. As with everything, with a human, repetition is key as to establishing clarity. So we repeat this picture, all right, every day in our mind, over breakfast, on the drive to work, whatever it is, we repeat it over and over again every day. And every time we do it, we make it more and more detailed and more colourful. So it's bringing it to life. No matter what environment then, political, social, or outside influences that are thrown at us, our emotional desire will survive that turbulence. Let me give you a quick analogy just so that it makes sense. Think about it like an old-fashioned AA roadmap. And if you don't know what these are, go and Google it if you're too young. Huge, great things they were, folding up. Anyway, it was the old way of planning a road trip. You would pick the route, you'd follow it to your destination, you'd have a list of all the roads that you would take, what roundabouts you would take. However, when you actually got onto your road trip and some bugger, normally on a bank holiday Monday, would dig up that road, you would then end up having to follow their diversions. all right, where they said to turn right, where they said to turn left. And often you had no clue where you were. You were in the, I'll say in the dark, but you know what I mean? You were without any landmarks. And that's what happens to us when we've just got that one sequence of events to get to our destination. Whereas actually, if you think about it, when you've got it really anchored into your heart, you know the direction you're going. It's almost like that nautical, the way of following the North Star. That's when you know you're always going to get there, rather than the old days, following that map, following the diversions. The amount of times people used to quit and come home. You only had to have one person turn the sign around and you were truly lost. You didn't know how long those diversions were for. You didn't know if you had petrol. So that's the analogy of what it means to have just that normal goal setting that we've all been taught how to do. Think about it like a long haul flight. When you take off, the pilots flick it over to autopilot, the pre-programmed navigation system that continues to make minor adjustments right the way through any of the trips. So if it actually gets knocked off with a gust of wind or something like that, it'll measure the difference between the two things and bring the plane back on course. That's exactly what we're talking about. That in human language, what we're talking about is having that goal, that vision so firmly in your heart, it becomes your intuition. You start making those gut decisions and it brings you back on course over and over again. Small but continuous alterations, keeping you on course the whole way through 2022. So I ask you again, what do you really, really want out of 2022? And start really making that unbreakable connection between you and your vision. And now I'd just like to take this opportunity to wish you a very happy new year, a prosperous new year, and I will see you in January, I hope. I hope you can join me.